worship the Lord, worship in spirit and truth. Those who say that they know Him must walk as He walked. Those who worship the Lord, worship in spirit and truth. Those who say that they know Him must walk as He walked. He is the way and the truth, and in Him is the life. If we obey His word, then we walk in the light. He is the way and the truth, and in Him is the life. If we obey His word, then we walk in the light. If we say that we know Him, but we don't keep His word, then we walk in the darkness, and the truth's not in us. If we walk in the light, we will have fellowship sweet, and the blood of Jesus will cleanse us from sin. He is the way and the truth, and in Him is the life. If we obey His word, then we walk in the light. He is the way and the truth, and in Him is the life. If we obey His word, then we walk in the light. He is the way and the truth, and in Him is the life. If we obey His word, then we walk in the light. He is the way and the truth, and in Him is the life. If we obey His word, then we walk in the light.
Well, good morning, friends. Good to see you. Good to be with you here this morning as we get into our Wednesday. As our dear friend Priscilla calls it, Happy Hump Day. It is the day to get over the hump. It's the midway point of the week, and everything is built up to it, and then you slide down the other side. But we got to get through the Wednesday first. But it is Wednesday, and helping. Happy. Try it again. Welcome. That's what I'm trying to say. Welcome to Wednesday. And today we're thinking about a sleepy Jesus. We're thinking about a lesson that, an incredible lesson actually, that is brought out of his teaching as he is awakened from sleep. And we're going to read some here in the books of Matthew, Mark, and Luke this morning, to see the narrative, to ask some questions, and to see what incredible lesson we can learn as we look together at these chapters in the Scriptures. Matthew chapter 8, beginning at verse 18. Jesus saw the crowd around him. He gave orders to cross the other side of the lake. So we see this crowd. We see the crowd around him. He's feeling pressed, and maybe he's feeling depleted. He gives the orders to cross the other side, and then a teacher of the law, before Jesus perhaps could get to the other side, says, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus replied, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." Now, it's interesting. You think about this in the context of the modern day, and what we would maybe even label as a prosperity gospel, and that we would think that, following Jesus, we should have a bigger house and a nicer car and so on and so forth, that all those things come with Jesus. And yet Jesus said this to this teacher of the law, this religious leader. He says, foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to call his head. In other words, he said, I don't have a house. I really am unencumbered by the stuff of this world. Is that what you want? Is that the type of life you would want to pursue, where you have no place to lay your head, where you're willing to walk away from your earthly possessions? I'm not saying that all of us have to walk away from earthly possessions, but what I am saying is that sometimes the call of God may call us to do such things. We look at those disciples, thinking of the Chosen series, particularly thinking of Matthew, the tax collector, and what was portrayed there of him having this nice home, having money, and having nice clothes, and those types of things. And yet he comes to the place of being willing to relinquish those things, walk away from those things, so that he can follow Jesus. Back to the text. Another disciple said, Lord, first let me go bury my father. Obviously his father has passed away, but Jesus told him, follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. In other words, the lesson here is, don't be encumbered by what we have in this world. Don't be encumbered. Don't be weighed down. Don't be tied to it so much. Be tied to kingdom things. Be tied to the eternal things. Be tied to the unseen things. Now, he's been pressed. Verse 18 talks about the crowd around him. It speaks of him giving the orders to go to the other side. There's a few final brief conversations that take place as he's getting into the boat. And then you read in verse 23, then Jesus got into the boat and his disciples followed him. Without warning, a furious storm came up on the lake so that the waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. I just think about it for a moment. Do storms sometimes come up out of just nowhere? I remember a lot of summers when I was out at Fairhaven. I didn't serve there all summer. I did background things, and there were times I was around camp mid-afternoon, and it's a gorgeous day, and all of a sudden out of the backside, what we'd call kind of the hill behind camp, next thing you know, you're looking up and there's a storm coming. Kind of without warning. You ever been in that situation where everything looks great? Maybe you're out and cutting your grass in the middle of the summer and it's a nice sunny day. Next thing you know, you're getting rained upon, just kind of without warning. And this is a situation that the disciples are experiencing without warning. And it's not just a storm. Notice what it says. It's a furious storm that comes upon the lake. And it can happen that way in the Sea of Galilee, and not something that they were unaccustomed to. But it was such a storm that the waves swept over the boat. It says, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. Now, how tired do you have to be to sleep through a storm like that? I mean, Jesus is flat out exhausted. Apparently, the press of the crowds and the press of the ministry and the power going out from him and all of these things leave him absolutely exhausted. I mean, Jesus was man just like you and I. He gets tired. He got tired just like you and I. He needed food just like you and I. Perhaps he didn't have food. Perhaps there were no Monster Energy drinks. Perhaps there was no coffee. Perhaps there was no banana for a little bit of nourishment. But we just know this, that Jesus is so tired that he is asleep in the bow of the boat. Now, we'll pick some of these things up in some of the other passages that we will look at, just to be that exhausted. Now, I don't know about you. I'm at the age now where I can sit down in my chair at the end of the day, and within 5 minutes I can be asleep. And maybe you're like that too. I don't know. I'm at that age now where that happens to me quite a bit. There's the chair, the feet go up, head goes back, whatever might be on the television might come on. Doesn't matter. Within 10 minutes, I'm asleep. Are you like that? Now, maybe you've also, maybe you can also think of times in your life where you were so pressed and the work was just so constant that you were just so exhausted that you could sleep through anything. And this is exactly what Jesus is doing, sleeping through anything. And so they call on him and say, Lord, save us. We are going to drown. Now, let's finish this passage before we go to the Mark passage and see if there's some nuances there, other aspects that we might want to draw. It says, he replied, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? Then he got up, rebuked the winds and waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, what kind of man is this that even the winds and the waves obey him? Friends, this is our Jesus. That is who this is. This is the Jesus who can calm the winds and the waves. And notice it was instantaneous. He got up, rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. I mean, it was the way you read it, it was like that. He just rebuked the winds, he rebuked the waves, and the storm just went away. And it says the men were amazed and asked, what kind of man is this that even the winds and the waves obey him? Friends, this, and I just said this is our Jesus. He is asking us to believe him. He's asking us to trust in him. Well, let's look at the Mark passage. This story is also written in the Synoptic Gospel, Mark chapter 4, down at verse 35. I do need to look at my notes here to make sure I'm staying in the right place. Here we go. Let's read this one. It says, that day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, let's go over to the other side. Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. And there were other boats, so we know from this narrative there were other boats. It wasn't just a lone boat. There were other boats that went along. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern. This is how we know he was in the front of the boat, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, you think he's in the stern. He's up in the very front of the boat. And you're thinking, okay, why is not this storm waking Jesus? He is this tired. So the disciples woke him and said, teacher, don't you care if we drown? He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, be quiet, be still. Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? They were terrified. I mean, this scared them even more and asked each other, who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. So we get a little bit more detail, or another aspect of detail. Mark calls this a furious squall. He speaks about the waves breaking over the boat so that it's nearly swamped. We know that Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion, and the disciples had to wake him. The storm did not wake Jesus. The disciples had to wake Jesus. And what does he do? He just simply says, quiet, be still, to the winds, to the waves, and everything dies down. You know what, Priscilla, you're right. The back of the boat, the stern of the boat, he's in the stern. Is the stern the back? I think the stern's the back. Priscilla is absolutely right about that. He's in the back of the boat. Anyway, he's in the boat. He's out in the open, and he is, thank you for correcting me. I will take that. He's in the open. He's getting wet. The waves are coming over the edge of the boat. If it's raining, he's getting wet. If it's happening that way, He's getting wet, and he's still sleeping through it and doesn't even awaken until they awaken him. And he says the same thing. Do you still have no faith? Let's look at the Luke passage and see. Luke chapter 8, verses 22 through 25. Okay, one day, Jesus said to his disciples, let's go over to the other side of the lake. So they got into a boat and set out. Now, a detail is different here is it says nothing about the crowds. The other two passages speak about the crowds pressing in on Jesus. He is hard pressed. There are demands upon him left and right. That's in the other passages. This passage doesn't indicate this. It just says one day Jesus said to his disciples, let's go over to the other side of the lake. So they got into a boat and set out. As they sailed, he fell asleep. Squall came down on the lake so that the boat was being swamped and they were in great danger. I mean, it says in this passage that there was the danger of the boat maybe sinking. So the disciples didn't go out. The disciples went, woke him and said, Master, Master, we're going to drown. He got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waters. The storm subsided and all was calm. He says, where is your faith? He asked his disciples, and in fear and amazement, they asked one another, who is this? He commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him. Now, there's some different things that you can pull out of this. One of the questions that is here is, was it raining? Did one of the passages say it was raining? We certainly know that the winds are there, the waves are there, so much so that they are breaking over the side of the boat. We know this. And one of the things that Walter is noting here as he is interacting with this is, one thing about this, the disciples reporting gives this incident its validation. I mean, they're reporting it. They're validating, yes, this did happen to us. And yet, what is the key question in the midst of this? There is definitively a key question that Jesus asked them in all three passages. He asks them, where is your faith? What is up with you that you're not trusting me? Now, we could talk about the storm. You have storms in your life. I have storms in my life. We have things that happen. We have things that we sometimes have to weather. And we could talk about storms. Are you going through a storm in your life right now? And storms look different to us. I'm in perhaps the midst of a personal storm right now in some ways, and I don't want to get into that. And it's a storm I have to ride out. It's not a relational storm. It's not that there's some huge problem somewhere. And I would just ask you to pray for Pastor Jim and the storm that he is in right now. It's an internal type of storm. Again, there's no issue, no problem in a relationship. It's all internal with me. And so that's my storm. Are you going through a storm right now? Maybe you're going through a storm of sickness. Maybe you're going through a storm of, again, I talked about this yesterday. There's more month left at the end of your money. And so you're trying to scrape enough to get by and saying, how am I going to do this? Maybe it is a relational storm. Maybe it's the storm of having teenagers in the house. Sometimes teenagers are an absolute delight. I think it's a myth that teenagers always have to be riddled with problems. I don't think that's the truth. But sometimes teenagers can be challenging. So maybe it's the challenge of having teenagers. Maybe it's a storm in your marriage. Maybe it's what storm might you be going through right now? For some, it's an external storm. You can see it. Some, it's a storm at work. I don't know what your storm might be, but what I do know is this. God is asking you, Jesus is asking you to trust him in the midst of the storm that you are going through. Now, you think about this. I mean, this must have been quite an incredible storm, because remember who Jesus is riding with. Jesus is riding with these disciples, many of whom were fishermen, and not just like casual fishermen. They were professional fishermen. This is how they put food on the table as professional fishermen. And that, yet they're thinking they're going to lose their lives. That's what's going through their minds. But yet, in the midst of it, we see Jesus' humanity. Jesus is tired, just like us. Jesus gets hungry, just like us. He gets thirsty, just like us. Jesus experienced physical, emotional, and spiritual distresses, just like us. Yes, Jesus was God, but don't forget, he was also fully man. Absolutely. He became one of us, like us in every way, and it tells us in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 17, yet without sin, the God-man needed a break, a rest from ministry. Mark it down. The bigger the ministry gets, the more intentional you need to be in getting away for time to rest. Ministry can be all-consuming, extremely demanding. You'll get tired. You'll need to escape. And sometimes we don't do a very good job of this. I've watched some pastors on sabbatical, and they're still going to this conference and still doing that, and still speaking here. And it's like, dude, take a break. As the movement grows, we see Jesus using the Sea of Galilee often as a place to escape and recuperate with his leaders. Where can you go? Much of the next year of ministry, it will happen on or around the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus will often get into the boat, not to get to the other side, but just simply to get out of the pressure of the crowds around him. It didn't happen because he didn't love people. It didn't happen because he was tired of people, but just because he needed to be alone with his leaders. He wanted to teach them a point, or sometimes even to pull away and be with the Father. These leaders in the midst of this storm are scared for their life. Can you imagine the conversation they're having? How can Jesus sleep through this? Why don't you wake him up? I'm not going to wake him up. And just think of the conversation that may have been taking place there on the boat. But finally, they think they're going to drown, and they scream, Lord, save us. And that's the words out of Matthew chapter 8, verse 25. These are the words that Jesus loves to hear. All you have to do is cry out, I can't do this, save me, and he is right there for you. A great verse is in Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 17, where it says, the Lord your God is with you. He is mighty to save, and he will take great delight in you. He will quiet you with his love. He will rejoice over you with singing. Wow. Today, say this, the Lord my God is with me, and he is mighty to save. Whatever it is that you're going through, the Lord my God is with me. He is mighty to save, and he will take great delight in you. He will quiet you with his love. He will rejoice over you with singing. Wow. Absolutely incredible. Zephaniah 3:17. He is with you. Now, after saving the day, Jesus looks at them and says this, basically, guys, where's your faith? He questions their faith. He didn't expect them to still the storm. He just expected them to know him well enough by now that he is never too busy or tired to save the day. No matter how much you call on him, he never grows weary of helping you. That is why he came to earth. He is here to help you with your storm. Now, I know what it is for me this week. I know several phone calls I need to make. I know things I need to get on the appointment book for Monday and Tuesday next week. Next week on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, I will not be on. I don't think I'll be on. I'll let you know. I definitely will not be on Wednesday because I'm going to be on an airplane at 6 a.m. on my way to Florida for just a few days. I'm going down as a part of Concentric to network with several disciple-making leaders down in Florida. It's a training event, and I'm going to show up just to be there and to interact with people. But for me, I know the most pressing thing in my life, and personally, I want you to know, I am being challenged by what we're talking about this morning in my own life as well. I mean, I'm being challenged with, will I trust him? There's an aspect of what I'm supposed to be doing in my job right now as a Bible college president that I don't run to. That it's foreign to me. It's an area that it's very uncomfortable for me, and I'm just sharing this with you so you know that you can pray for me, that I overcome my fears, and that God himself, and I'm coming to Jesus and saying this today about this: Jesus, save me. Jesus, save me. And I would say to you, and I'm not talking about a spiritual salvation, I'm saying save in the situation. And I know what I need to see the Lord do. And for you, what is your situation? What is your storm right now? Maybe you need to just come to the Lord and say, Lord, save me. Maybe we need to stop fighting the storm. Maybe we need to stop worrying about the storm. Instead, we need to get on our knees and admit we need our mighty warrior to save us. Just practice saying, God, save the day. Now, I know that there are some of you who are listening, and I'm looking at some of the comments here. You know, sometimes it is many storms at once at different intensities. And Laura, that's absolutely right. And sometimes, and it's true, sometimes we don't see God delivering us from that storm. It is absolutely true that sometimes, and there are testimonies here. I'm looking at the list of people who are in the listening audience who are interacting by their comments during the live portion, during the live broadcast. And I know some of you have gone through long-term, and you're still going through long-terms, and wondering, will there ever be some resolution? I pray for you, and I encourage you to pray. And God says, hold on to me in the midst of this storm. And it's a difficult, challenging. I mean, those words are understatements for what some of you I know are going through right now. But I want to encourage you, still say those words. God save the day. God save me today. God, enable me to stand up under this weight, whatever the weight is that is going on in your life, that you would say, God, help me to stand up underneath this weight, and God, save me. Sometimes it's like, I can't, we're maybe not seeing what we need to see, but God says, keep trusting me. So friends, I want to encourage you today. Don't place yourself in a situation where Jesus would be saying to you, where's your faith? Rather, put yourself in a situation today where your faith is at work, where you're trusting in the Lord for his good work in your life. Lord, hear our prayer today. You know the whispers of prayers coming from each person in this who is listening, whether they're listening to the live broadcast or listening later on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, or on a podcast outlet. Lord, hear each of our prayers, that you would save us today. Lord, if there's somebody that needs spiritual salvation, then save them. But if there's somebody in a situation that needs saving, I also pray you'd save them. And Lord, for those that need it today, that you would say the word and it would be done. The storm would go away. Trust Jesus in the middle of your storm today, as Walter has said. Lord, hear our prayer. We trust in you today, in Jesus' name.